Dave begins snooping through Rose's journal book thingy. We see that it's a book called Dream Bubbles by Charles Dutton, and we get some foreshadowing stuff, I guess. But we're gonna skip that. And then the foreshadowing basically pays off, I guess, now. Oh no, it doesn't. Anyway, we get another flash of Jade's world. Jade's world. Zoom out. Keep zooming out. Zooming out some more. There's lots of snow. There's little patches of dirt and grass here and there. We see like the frog ruins, the volcano. Land of frost and frogs. Yay. Which also tells us that Kanaya's land was the land of something in frogs. I actually don't remember what Kanaya's land was called. I think it was like, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Point is, when we saw Kanaya's land, it was called the Lands of Blank and something that we couldn't see because it was all garbled. But now we know it was frogs. Why are frogs important? Well, because they are. Get over it. This is a very long flash animation for all the things that aren't happening. Hey, it's Jade. She do be sleeping though. I'm gonna read the Charles Dutton thing. If you know if it's over, okay, I'm not gonna read it. Cool. And with that, we leave. And we transition into the past. Anyway, Jade answers a thing from Pfeffery. And Jade recognizes Pfeffery. Oh wait, no, she just recognizes that she's a troll. And they have their conversation. And Jade's like, I feel like we talked before, but we definitely haven't. And then basically we get the revelation that like this is a dream and that they did talk before. As we would remember. And then Pfeffery shows up in the dream. And Pfeffery's dead. Yay. Jade wakes up again and decides she really needs to stop falling asleep. Jade debeds and drops into the snow, which is very deep. Goes up to her waist. She doesn't know where her laptop is. She's pretty sure it's up in the atrium, but she's gonna have to go find it. Also, something's happening. What could it be? Obviously nothing. Unless it's time for another flash. So now that now that Beck has been prototyped, the enemies all have Beck powers, which means they can teleport around and are nigh invincible. At least for now. So we get this fun little thing where Jade shoots at this imp and it keeps teleporting her around to different places. Starts off just all over her island, but I believe it might take her to other places. Yes, it takes her to Dave's world, and we see a Dave in the background, as well as all the crocodiles. We go to John's world. I don't know if I'm going to play this whole thing, because I think it goes on for a minute. Rose's land. Fun stuff. Back to Dave's world. We see Sleeping Dave. And I'll do one more and then I'll move on. Hey, Dave woke up. Back to the beginning, I think. So let's go. Whoa, it's Beck Sprite. Wow. Beck Sprite kills the imp with a big explosion. Good dog. Best friend. Jade levels up. She goes up her echelon ladder from Green Tyke to Kiddo Eclipse. And she tries to talk to Beck, but doesn't go so well. So she decides to keep conversations with Beck Sprite to a minimum. And somebody starts talking to Jade through a panel the same way Wayward Vagabond talked to John before. And it turns out to be PM, and Beck blows up her computer. Oops. And then we go back to the present, where PM has been put in charge and been given a crown, but she doesn't want to rule, so she throws it on the ground. WQ tries to talk PM down a bit, and PM decides to appoint WQ as the first, or as their royal advisor, and gives them the new royal insignia. Anyway, back to Jade. She goes back to the grand foyer. There's not really anything in here. It's actually completely empty. Presumably Beck just cleared it all out because he can. Jade goes upstairs to the atrium, and it's completely fucked up, but she finds her lunch top undamaged, as well as messages from Dave. So she sits down to talk to Dave. Dave the knave. Got him. Dave welcomes her to the medium. She says that the last time she tried talking to him, he just was knacking, and he says it was probably some horror terror chirping at her during one of her nap bubble mind fucks. And then he mentions that she just appeared right in front of him when he woke up, which we saw in the flash. And Jade talks about how these things are unkillable, but Dave's like, no, it's cool. You can actually kill them. Trust me, I'm good enough to do it. You'll get there. And mentions seeing her in the other places as well. They talk about how Dave's been doing time traveling, and Dave says he's on her planet, or on Jade's world now, and it's fucking cold. And says he's gonna go someplace warm. And then he signs off, and then signs back on 2 seconds later. But for him, it's been an hour, because time travel. Anyway, Jade is really into the time travel thing and thinks it's super cool. Unlike John, John thought it was cool as well. It was Dave who was jaded about it because he's been doing it for a while from his perspective. A few days, I guess. I don't know. He says he doesn't think of hours the same way anymore. Anyway, they basically just talk about how cold her world is and how it must be extra cold for her because she lived on a tropical island, essentially. Even though Dave lived in Texas, so he probably didn't get a lot of cold himself. But she's really into the snow thing, actually, because she's never seen snow before. Dave thinks lava's cooler than snow. She thinks snow's cooler than lava, blah, blah, blah. She mentions she's going to bother John, but Dave tells her not to because he's on his, quote, fucking wind mission or whatever, getting all his ridiculous magic cyclone powers on and realizing his huge blowy destiny as the chump of Shoosh. Anyway, so John's out there getting wind powers, as we have seen before. Also, he tells Jade that she's starting off kind of slow, but honestly, she's probably doing better than he was when he first started, and that it seems to be a little easier for each subsequent person to get their shit together when they get in, for multiple reasons. But anyway, shit's wacky. John lost his computer and game disc. Not sure how. They're not sure how, but possibly in the magic wind cyclone bullshit. And instead of John being in charge of Jade, turns out Dave will be in charge of Jade, as she was in charge of him, to a degree. Also, we see Dave's been up to some shit, and he actually made a copy of the game disc, the same way we've seen like people, the kids create items in the past with all this shit. Dave's basically figured out how to scam the system, so that's cool. Yeah. So Dave sets that shit up and sends Jade her disc, and Jade starts alchemizing shit. And then we go to Dave when he first woke up. He grabs his eye shades from a crock, starts talking to Rose. We see that Rose was previously threatening the alligator to stop talking, or to stop knacking, I guess. Anyway, we find out what happened. Dave fell asleep. Dave's sprite killed some monsters and flew away. Jade fired a bullet at an imp and vanished, and then Dave woke up. This Dave obviously was not the one from the conversation we just saw, so he doesn't really know exactly what's happening. Yada yada. They kind of have their own little back and forth. Dave talks about how he saw the horror terrors when he slept. Rose likes the horror terrors. Jade and Dave do not. Apparently the horror terrors are getting killed by something or someone. They're being massacred. Dave doesn't give a shit. But Rose insists that anything that can exterminate these creatures is definitely a big threat that they need to worry about. We also learn that Dave was technically always awake in his dream self. He just chose to like not do anything with it and just kind of zone everything out, essentially. And then also they're going to be plotting a course to the green sun, which is the power source of the first Guardians, because destroying it stops the first Guardians, so destroying it would stop Jack, or Bec Noir as he is now known. But getting to it's going to be hard because the geometry of the furthest ring is very complex. The space-time is labyrinthine, I don't know how you pronounce it. I don't care. They talk about getting a map. And Rose says that she's going to she's going to be the one to fly to the furthest ring, but only if John is successful in his mission to get the tumor. It's a large growth in the center of the battlefield, but he won't be able to remove it until he fully realizes his abilities. And apparently the tumor is a big fucking bomb that's going to go off and destroy their entire session, and that's why their session is going to fail, because the tumor, partially. It's sort of a fail-safe in the game, essentially. If the game is doomed from the start, then there's a bomb in the battlefield that'll just blow everything up. But they're going to take out the tumor, and they're going to fly it to the green sun to blow up the green sun instead, because the green sun is the size of 2 universes. It's very big, very large. She also talks about how her informant is apparently a guy who exists in another universe. Not one of the trolls, though. We don't really know much about this stream informant, except we do. It's a guy we've seen before. A certain Doc Scratch. But apparently Doc Scratch wants to summon his master. And Doc Scratch is also a first Guardian. I might have already mentioned that before. I'm not totally sure. And we find out that Rose going to blow up the red sun, or the green sun, is apparently a suicide mission. But it's fine, because it's just her dream self that's going. So, there'll still be normal Rose left alive. So it's not a huge deal. Or is it? Dave's like, alright, cool, you could have fucking mentioned that before I got worried. Rose mentions how they all seem to have their own troll that's helping them out. Dave mentions that there's a Juggalo one, and that's about where the conversation ends. Then Rose talks to Kanaya, and we seem to be getting close to the end of the point on Rose's timeline where Rose's timeline gets cut off, and also Kanaya mentions that Losing your dream self is actually kind of serious, and they're important to a person in ways that aren't always obvious. And Kanaya is, of course, very worried about what's going to happen to Rose, but Rose is like, whatever, it'll be fine. Rose admits she doesn't know why she's going to go dark on the timeline, but she's not super worried about it because she's confident that she's got things under control. Kanaya mentions that she's been doing something on the side. She apparently trained a powerful wizard, and we cut to Kanaya and Aridin. Yes, Aridin. I get Aridin and Equius' names mixed up a lot. And she gives Aridin a magic wand. But of course, after all this, obviously it was all sarcasm, and no one expects Aridin to actually matter in any significant way. And Rose and Kanaya just think it's funny to like dick around with Aridin. Anyway, Jade gets a message from Tavros, of all people. They have a pretty nice conversation at first. They bond over how they were both on Prospit and they spent a lot of time running around. Tavros mentions that he was sleeping as much as possible after they got once they got in game, because he liked being on Prospit. He kind of vaguely mentions the thing where, Prospit got blown up. And then he starts asking for permission to commune with Lucis, Jade's Lucis Beck. Basically, he's asking to control Beck, and mentions that he did it before, way back when in Jade's timeline. She had 2 flintlock pistols for some reason, and she was just banging it on the ground. It went off. Tavros controlled Beck to teleport the bullet to hit what he refers to as a felon on her property, which was actually her grandpa, and that's how her grandpa died. So it turns out Tavros killed Jade's grandpa. Of course, he doesn't know what a grandpa is. So she's like, has a little trouble being mad at him because, like, clearly this, as we've seen, like, you don't live with adults or anyone else on Alternia, so it makes a lot of sense from his perspective, but it's still pretty fucked up, especially since Beck probably would have teleported the bullet away anyway, just not into her grandpa, but whatever. He mentions that he was in a wheelchair. He accidentally ran over his Lucis Tinkerbell because Tinkerbell was like sleeping behind his wheelchair, and he accidentally rolled over him. But Tavros mentions he's not paralyzed anymore because he has robot legs, and that being not physically handicapped is most certainly the key to having high self-esteem. And Jade's like, I don't know about that, Tavros. So basically, we see that Tavros is he has like this sort of false persona of confidence that he's built on himself because he doesn't have real confidence. And his way of being confident is just assuming that everything he does is good and the correct choice, no matter what it means. And we see he's starting to copy Vriska, and that he is purposefully putting himself into Jade's life. And clearly he just has no idea what he's doing, but he's trying to act like he does. They also talk about Rufio, his imaginary friend. Tavros seems to think that being upfront about the fact that Rufio is just an imaginary friend and not a real guy will give Tavros more confidence for some reason. And then Tavros just straight up starts hitting on Jade, and she's like, thanks, but I'm not interested. And we learn that Tavros is one of those guys that thinks if you're nice to him, you probably have feelings for him. And he starts going like, but I'm so confident and cool, and I saved your life, so doesn't that mean you like would have to like me now? Basically, Tavros kind of sucks, which is fine. I never liked Tavros much to begin with. Jade just starts getting annoyed talking to him, and basically what Tavros wants to do is he wants to get Beck Sprite to attack Bec Noir, but that would probably be a bad idea, and Jade is very upset about that. And Jade tells him not to, and he's like, all right, I respect that, but I wonder, quote, I wonder if a truly self-confident guy with the best self-esteem there is would even need to ask. Maybe the best guy would just know he would be successful and would do it anyway because it was for your own good and everyone else's. And then Jade tells him off. And then finally gets him to leave. And then Vriska messages Tavros making fun of him, and he's like, hey, what the fuck? How did you read that? Well, if you look at the picture from the previous page, we'll go back to that. 2 pages ago, 3 pages ago, 4 pages. Way back here, I'm not going to go back to it myself, but it's up. Basically, her whole screen is projected up like a hologram. So Vriska could just totally read it. Oh, it was on the next page. I'll just put the next page up then. So yeah. Take that, Tavros. Get fucked. If there's one thing I like about Vriska, it's that she fucks with Tavros. And basically, Vriska just starts making fun of him a bunch until Tavros is like, you know what? Oh, wait, yeah, actually, Vriska brings up the thing where Bec's probably going after Bec Noir and how it wouldn't work, and how she already thought of that, and it would be it wouldn't go through. But currently, Vriska has her own ovens in the fire, and basically is like, this is how a pro does it. And we find out she's actually working with fucking DD, and DD breaks into Dave's house and kills a Dave, and yada yada. Vriska just keeps giving him more and more shit, and then she basically admits that she created Bec Noir. It was her fault because she thinks that as the best player the game's ever had, she should leave her fingerprints all over. And Tavros is like, well, I guess that makes you the bad guy, so I'm going to kill you now. So Tavros gets his lance, and he starts going to find Vriska, and she just says, I'll be waiting, with a little heart, and Tavros trips down some stairs. Because it's Tavros. And then we go to the fourth wall, and we see Andrew Hussey riding on that one dragon thing from the Neverending Story, who then barfs all over his bullies. And we go to John, who hit the top of his etch-a-ladder. And the clouds we saw disperse before come back, because that's not how you get rid of the clouds. That'd be too easy. And then we get a game that I'm not going to play, because I don't really like a lot of the games. But basically, John goes to a nearby village. Vriska leads him up to his quest bed to take a legendary nap, because taking a nap here will let him god tier. Have we talked about god tiering yet? Well, we're going to find out what god tiering is. Basically, she says that she's leading John here because she thinks John's the best candidate to be the big hero of his game. So she's going to help him out to reach god tier. She's going to use her powers to put him to sleep on his god tier bed, and he'll wake up. But she's like, you have to tell me to do it. As a hero, you have to commit to this. And he's like, all right, Vriska, please put me to sleep. And she does. So John falls asleep on his quest bed, and Bec Noir shows up and puts a sword through John. We see John's bloody shirt. And a look through at the sky on his world. We see John lying there dead. Dead John. We see WV, who's very sad. Then we start zooming in from outside of John's planet. There's cool music here that kind of makes this more interesting than it probably looks on screen right now. Anyway, John's quest bed starts glowing, and then we see the air or the breath symbol. A bunch of fireflies fly him to him. He starts glowing. WV is aghast. John's clothes turn gold. More shiny, more cool imagery. Wind blowing everywhere. John rises into the air. The air rises into the air. Teehee. Jade, Dave, and Rose can apparently see this from their worlds, which I don't think ever happens in any other case, but I'm not totally sure, to be honest. And we zoom in on the breath symbol, and we zoom out on John, who is now not dead and is in some interesting looking clothes. With a long hood. We also get to see a little Beck Noir looking at the screen as WV watches. And then the screen turns off. Ominous. And then we see Dave laying on his quest bed. And then we see Dave standing over Dave with a sword out. That's quite the turn of events.